And the way, pigeon. Oh, pop, pop. I'm thrilled to finally be driving an Austin A35. Never driven one before, so it's going to be quite the experience. Let's start by talking about the history of these fascinating little cars. So the story of these skinny little cars actually begins with the A30 of 1951. It was an all-new design for Austin. Unitary construction, so no separate chassis. A little overhead valve engine known as the A-series engine, which would become absolutely famous in later life. Now what we have here is an A35. They came in 1956. They introduced the 948cc A-series engine, a bit more pep, 34 brake horsepower, and also a much stronger bottom end. The previous incarnation of the A-series engine had white metal bearings, and they soon discovered in endurance testing those really weren't up to the job. But it's worth remembering, when the car came out in 1951, Britain had no motorways. Even when this example came out, there were still no motorways, so there was still a bit of a newfangled thing. People just tended to potter locally, they didn't go long distance, and that's why they used the white metal bearings initially. There just wasn't really a demand for something that would last hundreds of thousands of miles at high speed. So looking somewhat lost in this tiny engine bay is the 948cc engine, also fitted to the Morris Minor 1000. Tiny little Zenith carburetor I think you got on these. You would have got an SU on your Morris, and we've got a steering box and a battery. Luxury of luxuries, this model even has a heater, which was an optional extra. A more modern fitting is this brake servo, which unfortunately is where the washer bottle should be. So currently this car has no windscreen washers. Looking at the side profile, you can kind of see where the line of the four-door body would have gone. It's almost like this is just a separate extra panel to convert the body shell, because initially it was a four-door saloon, but this is the two-door, so you got a nice large door here. It isn't a deluxe, so we haven't got opening rear windows, and even the windows themselves aren't winding. They're slide up and down. You can lock them inside, as we'll soon see. Moving round to the rear, the A35 gained a larger rear window rather than the tiny little window of the A30. Really early A30s had boot hinges inside the boot area, but that robbed space, so they changed to simple external type. And as you can see, the boot space is actually quite reasonable. The spare wheel is strapped up against the side. Again, that was a change for later on in the A30 production, but yeah, you can get a reasonable amount of stuff in there. Certainly plenty of food, and there's the fuel filler. Moving inside, the smell is instantly of old British car, which is probably the Vinide, the fake leather seats. It just smells absolutely incredible. We've got a right hand handbrake down here, that's your squeeze to release it. And if we hop aboard, we've got a nice big steering wheel to keep the steering light, and a nice little center display here. This is the indicator switch, so you go left for left and right for right. We've got heater, blower, windscreen wipers, panel lights, and the key, and yeah, the optional extra heater. What luxury. An ashtray over here. Oh, maybe it is a deluxe, because we've got the twin ashtrays. That was a feature of the deluxe, and someone has added some extra gauges, probably sensibly. But the thing you may notice, I'm sitting really low down, so there's loads of headroom. This seat is a very strange design. As you move it back, the rear support slides down this hump, and that actually means that the seat goes down as it goes further back, so you get more headroom the longer your legs are, which is quite clever. Spindly little gear lever, but for the A35 it was remote rather than straight into the top of the gearbox, so that was a change. And there's the pedals, looking quite splendid. A little throttle pedal there. Brakes are hydromechanical. The front wheels are hydraulic. The rear wheels, there's one master cylinder in the middle, and then it operates cables, I think, or rods to the rear brakes themselves. Bit strange. Suspension, double wishbone at the front, and semi-elliptic leaf springs at the back. Let's try the rear seat for size. There is no tipping mechanism. You just tip the seat quite simply, like early Minis. In fact, and you can pull the seat back, and a reasonable amount of room, you would say. Again, decent headroom. I'm just starting to brush across the back, but yeah, it's okay. I've got nothing to play with, no opening window. It's all incredibly simple, but I do get a nice good view of the dashboard, and it looks like we've got an interior light hiding away under there. What luxury. But here's a problem: the door handle's all the way up there. Incidentally, if I do that, it locks the window so it can't be forced. So push it down one click and now you can open the window, push it down more to open the door, which I must do before I tilt the seat. So practicality is not the best, but there we go. I'm going to push that up because I'll never reach it from the other side. We'll lock that, close the door. Oh, I didn't close it properly. There we go, done. Now, there are no seat belts because seat belts were not a requirement until 1965, some considerable time after this car was built. Obviously you can fit them, there are ways and means, but it's never had them, it's never had seat belts, so the current owner has not fitted any. We shall start the engine. We apply some ignition, starter here, choke there. We don't need choke, she's warm, and a quick pull of that should get her into life. Maybe a bit longer. There it is, settles down immediately. Got a light switch over here, which is side lights, headlights, main beam. I don't think we're going to trouble anyone with main beam, but the warning light has come on. I might leave it on side lights just so I've got my DRLs activated. No synchromesh on first gear, which I keep forgetting, so it will crunch if I'm not careful. So usual trick is to go into second first, avoid the crunch. Handbrake is to my right, and it's very easy to release, and away we go. We're going left, so we turn that switch that way. It turns like you're turning it to the right to go left, but such is the life when it comes to old cars. And check we're clear, and away we go. Very charming sort of a noise. Unsurprisingly, it sounds quite a lot like a Morris Minor because it is the same engine. As one of the most disturbing things about the Morris Minor was it picked up an Austin engine. Yeah, full of charm. The steering is it's a steering box, so it's not as direct, it doesn't feel as accurate as the Morris Minor steering, but in other words, in terms of feel, it kind of just feels like a skinnier Morris Minor. Mine was always that little bit larger. Oh, I don't know what it is with this car, but people love trying to pull out in front of me in it, which is just marvelous. Because the brakes are not brilliant even with a servo or booster to you Americans. Don't really need first if you're not at a complete stop. But yeah, lovely, very nice, easy car to drive. It's just very, very simple. So you remember these cars came out, a lot of people would have been experiencing motoring for the first time. Some of these may even have been used by driving schools, so it was important that they were simple and easy to drive. The ride is a little agricultural, it must be said, and the suspension setup is rather peculiar. There is a rear anti-roll bar, but there is not a front anti-roll bar. So the owner assures me it is actually possible to lift the inside wheel if you corner hard. But I don't think we're going to be doing such antics today. It doesn't feel appropriate, but we will find some quicker roads to see how she goes. The initial A30 had a 28 horsepower engine, but those engines didn't really seem to have much grunt at all, and very slow. But 0 to 60 was like getting on for 40 seconds. Listen to that exhaust note. And national speed limit, we can accelerate. Out the way, pigeon. Oh, pop, pop. Yeah, it starts running out of revs fairly quickly, but we're doing almost 50 miles an hour. But the main difference was this 948 engine would be happy to do this all day, in a way the previous 803 engine would not. Dizzy heights of 60 miles an hour there. Feeling like slightly hard work. It certainly steers well enough. When you look at the A30 and A35, they look so narrow you assume they must fall over, but they don't. And even more surprising, they were actually quite successful in saloon car racing. They still are. There is a race series, a sort of entry-level historic race series for the A35. Oh, bit of a shake there in the front suspension. So it's certainly not what you call refined out on the open road, but you can make decent enough progress. The brakes a bit of a shove. It's very strange. So the front end wants to roll, but the back end does not. It's a bit peculiar. I'm not sure why they decided to do that. Unless it was precisely because they knew it lifted inside rear and slow the car down. Gear lever does rattle a bit sometimes. Now the A30 was quite popular, but the A35 took things to a new level because it was that much more usable. That's a big tractor and we're in a tiny little car. They sold over 220,000 A35s, and the majority were two-door, as here. But they also did, for a short time, they did a ute, a little pickup, very cute, a cute ute. And after that, they did a van as well. So it was an A30 and A35 van, and that continued in production until 1968, even gaining an 1100cc engine. But bizarrely, apparently they also did one which was 848cc, the same engine size as the original Mini, presumably for those who are preferring a more miserly fuel bill. I think over 500,000 A30s and A35s were built in total, including the commercial versions. And they've always had a very popular following in the classic car world, perhaps because so many people owned them when they were new. But they've always had to live in the shadow of the rather more famous Morris Minor. The Morris Minor, the first British car to sell over 1 million units. I think for some people they preferred the slightly more dynamic front end on a Morris Minor. And in fact it was just that little bit larger, a bit more family friendly. But it was the A30 that gave rise to the Austin Healey Sprite. Very similar sort of cars. But you can kind of tell the raughty exhaust note in this example. But so tractable an engine. Listen to how low that's pulling from. In fact, I can actually change into top gear at 20 miles an hour and it's no bother at all. It picks up nice and cleanly. That was always a bit of an A-series trademark. As you can see in a video I did looking at the history of the A-series engine. Oh, look at that smiley transit ice cream van. Yeah, this makes progress in a way the earlier 803cc engines just don't. So that is my first experience driving an Austin A35, and what a pleasure it was. So charming, and they go so well with this little engine. You want to go blasting down motorways, then this really isn't the car for you. But if you want to do some pottering around the countryside, I can think of no finer way to travel. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget you can head to the Hubnut store, look in the description for links and also support options. I look forward to seeing you in a future video driving something else. Who knows what it'll be. Farewell. no, we forgot the windscreen wipers, but we've got no screen wash. There is a manual override. Squish, squish. And oh, look at those little babies go. Good overlap, no triangle of doom, but yeah, they are tiny little wipers. Oh, I can park them at the top of the windscreen for speed mode. There is no parking, you have to park them yourself. There we go.